Have you ever wondered if ancient humans slept the way we do today? Picture this for a moment, long before your bed, before your pillow, before the gentle hum of electricity through your walls. There were humans just like you. They felt the same drowsiness as darkness fell. They experienced the same pull toward rest, the same surrender to dreams. But did they drift into sleep beneath firelit caves, lulled by the rustle of nocturnal winds, cycling to the same quiet phases of deep rest that you do now? Or did their nights belong to a different rhythm entirely? Watchful, fractured, attuned to a world where the dark held both dreams and dangers? Tonight, as you settle beneath your blanket, you're stepping into a mystery as old as consciousness itself. Why do we sleep? For nearly 1/3 of our existence, roughly 25 years of an average lifetime, we surrender to the dark. We enter hours of vulnerability, silence, and stillness. If nature favors survival above all else, why would it insist on this daily act of seeming helplessness? Despite decades of scientific study, sleep remains one of biology's most profound enigmas. We understand much about what happens when we sleep, but not entirely why it must happen at all. Some researchers describe sleep as a nightly reboot, a maintenance cycle where the body repairs damaged cells, rebalances hormones, and restores the immune system. During deep sleep, growth hormone surges through your bloodstream like a gentle tide. Your heart rate slows. Muscles release their daily tension. This is a restoration theory. Sleep is the body's most trusted mechanic, quietly fixing what daytime breaks. Others suggest sleep evolved as nature's energy conservation program. During sleep, your metabolism drops, core temperature cools, precious calories are preserved. To our ancient ancestors living without abundance, this nightly energy-saving mode may have meant the difference between survival and starvation. But sleep is not just for the body. The brain, too, requires its nightly work. Inside your skull right now, as you listen to these words, neurons are preparing for tonight's gentle symphony. They will rehearse today's lessons, solidifying memories and enhancing learning. This is brain plasticity theory, the idea that sleep helps the brain rewire itself anew each night, preparing for tomorrow's challenges. Without this mysterious process, memories decay, creativity diminishes, and cognitive functions fade like morning mist. Then there's something even more remarkable: the glymphatic system, your brain's night shift janitor. As you sleep, cerebrospinal fluid flushes through neural tissue, washing away waste products like beta amyloid, a toxic protein linked to Alzheimer's disease. Imagine a cleansing tide, sweeping debris from the shores of consciousness, leaving your mind clear for the next day's thoughts. These theories, restoration, conservation, plasticity, cleansing, they may all be true, woven together in sleep's ancient tapestry. Yet here lies a paradox that haunts sleep researchers. If sleep is so essential, why did evolution choose it, despite its enormous cost? Consider this. In the natural world, danger never sleeps. Predators roam, storms erupt, the unexpected waits in shadows. And yet, sleep exists in nearly every creature we've studied. Fruit flies slip into sleep-like states. Reptiles and fish enter periods of quiet stillness. Mammals and birds cycle through complex sleep phases, sometimes with one half of their brain resting, while the other remains alert. This is called unihemispheric sleep, a remarkable trick perfected by dolphins and migrating birds to survive in a world that never fully turns off. Even bears in their winter dens maintain sleep cycles, alternating between shallow slumber and deep metabolic rest. If sleep weren't essential, if it were somehow optional, evolution would have eliminated it millions of years ago. Yet across every continent, in every species, sleep endures. Vulnerability, it seems, is a price that life itself must pay for rest. Sleep is ancient, perhaps older than consciousness as we know it. We can trace its origins back to primitive life forms, long before mammals, long before birds took to the sky. Even simple creatures with the most basic nervous systems show signs of rest phases. As life grew more complex, so did sleep, and then something extraordinary happened. For mammals and birds, a new rhythm emerged. REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, a phase where dreams bloom behind closed eyelids, where neurons fire like lightning in the darkness, and where the body temporarily paralyzes itself to prevent acting out imagined events. REM sleep is strange, vivid, and possibly the birthplace of creativity and emotional healing. But it's still not fully understood. Think of it this way. If you live to 90, you will have spent roughly 30 years asleep. That's about 25% of your existence dreaming, repairing, and drifting through waves of night consciousness. Each night, your sleep cycles repeat in what scientists call ultradian rhythms, about 90 minutes each. You journey from light drowsiness to deep, slow-wave sleep, then into the vivid landscapes of REM. Most people travel through 4 to 6 of these cycles per night, each one carrying them further into restorative darkness, then lifting them back toward waking light. Think of these cycles like the tides of consciousness, flowing in and out, drawing you deeper into the mystery, then gently returning you to the surface. 3 biological systems guide this nightly journey, like ancient navigators steering you through the dark. First, your circadian rhythm, an internal clock ticking quietly in a cluster of cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, nestled deep in your hypothalamus. This clock responds to light, especially the blue wavelengths of morning sky, or the modern glare screens. As night falls, melatonin rises like a chemical lullaby, signaling your body prepare for rest. Second, the homeostatic sleep drive, a pressure that builds the longer you remain awake, like sand accumulating in an hourglass until sleep becomes irresistible. One of its key messengers is adenosine, a molecule that makes your eyelids heavy. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine, tricking your brain into temporary alertness, but the sand continues piling up behind the scenes. And third, the ultradian rhythm, that 90-minute ebb and flow of sleep stages, cycling through light sleep, deep restoration, and dreaming consciousness like a gentle tide. These processes work together, quietly, invisibly, whether you're in a skyscraper bedroom or sleeping beneath ancient stars. But sleep is not static. It has evolved alongside humanity, shaped not only by biology, but by environment, by culture, by the countless ways humans have learned to survive and thrive. To understand how you sleep now, in this moment, we must first travel back to the flickering warmth of prehistoric campfires, to the predators prowling the ancient night, to the early humans who first closed their eyes and drifted into dreams beneath a sky unmarked by cities. So come with me, let's begin this journey, not into wakefulness, but into the deep and ancient world of sleep. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world before electricity, before cities, before language had fully formed into the intricate tool we know today. A world where the night was vast and truly alive. Wind whispered through tall savanna grass. Unknown creatures stirred beyond the tree line. Overhead, an uninterrupted sky stretched from horizon to horizon, studded with stars so bright they cast shadows on the ground below. This was the world of early humans. From about 2.5 million years ago until just 10,000 years before Christ, our ancestors slept under entirely different rules. Their nights were dictated not by alarm clocks or glowing screens, but by firelight, hunger, the proximity of danger, and the ancient, steady pull of Earth's rotation. Have you ever wondered how they slept? Did they drift into peaceful, uninterrupted slumber the way sleep meditation apps might suggest? Or did sleep for them look like something else entirely? Fragmented, adaptive, communal, and shaped by the raw demands of survival? Tonight, let's explore the sleep of our prehistoric ancestors, guided by evidence from archaeology, anthropology, and the fascinating study of evolution itself. To glimpse how our ancestors likely slept, modern researchers have turned to the few remaining societies that still live close to nature's rhythms: the Hadza people of Tanzania, the San of the Kalahari Desert, the Tsamin of Bolivia, and the Agda of the Philippines. In 2015, researchers led by Jerome Siegel conducted groundbreaking studies of these groups. What they discovered was remarkable. None of these communities slept the way most modern people do. Instead of long, uninterrupted blocks of nighttime rest, they slept in shorter, flexible periods, averaging about 6.5 to 7 hours per night, but not always all at once. They rose before dawn, went to bed well after dark, and rarely napped during the day unless exhausted by physical exertion or illness. Even more striking, in these groups, no single hour of the night passes without at least someone awake. Among the Hadza, it's completely natural for one person to stir, tend the fire, listen to the night sounds, or simply gaze at the stars while others doze nearby. Researchers call this phenomenon sentinel sleep, a beautiful term for an ancient practice. In one Hadza camp that scientists observed, the probability that everyone was simultaneously asleep at any given moment was less than 1%. Think about that. In groups of 20 or 30 people, someone was virtually always conscious, aware, protective. Imagine it. A rhythm of shared vulnerability and protection. While some members slept deeply, others half dozed, ears attuned to the sounds of the wild, ready to wake fully if danger approached. This rotating night watch wasn't planned or discussed. It happened naturally, an emergent behavior that likely echoes the sleep patterns of early human groups stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. This is what anthropologists call communal sleep. Not just sleeping together for warmth, but sleeping as a coordinated group survival strategy. Modern societies often treat monophasic sleep, one long block at night, as the natural, healthy norm. But for most of human history, sleep was likely polyphasic, spread out in multiple phases across both day and night. In the prehistoric world, nighttime was never guaranteed to be peaceful. There were large predators to fear: lions, leopards, hyenas, and in some regions, massive cave bears. There were rival human groups, natural disasters, and a constant uncertainty of life without shelter or stored food. Early humans likely slept lightly and in coordinated shifts, balancing the body's need for restoration with the group's need for survival. Sleep was not a private act performed in isolated bedrooms. It was a communal ritual done in groups, near carefully tended fires, under rock overhangs, or huddled together in grass-lined sleeping areas. Picture a prehistoric band settling down for the night in a cave hollow. Their backs are warmed by glowing coals. Their ears remain tuned to the rustling darkness beyond the firelight. Someone stirs, listens, scans the shadows. Then, as that person drifts back towards sleep, another naturally awakens, takes up the watch, tend the fire. These natural sleep rotations reduce the risk of surprise attacks, help preserve group safety, and may have served another crucial function: the quiet passing of knowledge. Stories murmured by firelight, warnings whispered before dreams. The gentle teaching that happened in the liminal space between waking and sleeping. Roughly 1 million years ago, early human ancestors like Homo erectus began to reliably control fire. This was one of the most profound moments in human evolution, not just because it allowed for cooking food, but because it fundamentally reshaped the night itself. Fire offered warmth against cold nights, protection from predators, and something more subtle but equally important: a social gathering place that extended human consciousness beyond the boundaries of daylight. Anthropologist Daniel Fessler has described the campfire as humanity's first emotional technology. The flickering light induces what researchers call a relaxation response, lowering heart rates, reducing blood pressure, and triggering feelings of safety and social connection. Even today, studies show that firelight can calm the nervous system in ways that electric light simply cannot replicate. But fire did more than soothe. It fundamentally changed when humans slept. Before controlled fire, our ancestors likely went to sleep shortly after sundown and rose naturally with the dawn, following the same circadian patterns as most animals. With fire, early humans extended their waking hours deep into the night. They sat together around the flames, shared cooked food, told stories, and gazed into the hypnotic dance of light and shadow. Fire became humanity's first artificial light source, softening the sharp line between day and night and subtly shifting our species' circadian rhythms. We became, in a sense, the first animals to technologically hack our own sleep. And when it was finally time to sleep, the fire could not be left unattended. It needed to be carefully banked, monitored, occasionally fed with fresh fuel throughout the night. This was yet another reason why someone was always awake, always watchful. In this way, the flicker of flame reshaped human sleep, lengthening our social nights while still keeping the dangers of darkness at bay. Not all humans need identical amounts of sleep. Some people, due to rare genetic mutations like variants in the December 2nd gene, can function perfectly well on just 4 to 6 hours of rest without any negative effects. This genetic trait is extremely rare today, found in less than 1% of the modern population, but may offer us a crucial clue about ancestral life. In small prehistoric groups, natural short sleepers would have been invaluable. They could maintain the fire through the long night hours, watch for predators, and keep the group safe during the most vulnerable period of the daily cycle. These individuals weren't suffering from insomnia. They were genetically adapted to need less sleep. Other evolutionary adaptations likely favored light, easily disrupted sleep patterns. Even today, human sleep is more easily interrupted by sounds than the sleep of most other mammals, a lingering evolutionary effect from a world where constant vigilance was as necessary as dreaming. Evolution shaped our sleep as a delicate trade-off. Enough deep rest to repair and restore the body, but light enough that we wouldn't die in our dreams. Where you slept in prehistory depended entirely on where you lived and what challenges your environment presented. In cold climates, early humans likely huddled together for warmth, sharing body heat through collective sleeping arrangements, much like chimpanzees and bonobos still do today. Archaeological evidence suggests they may have created sleeping piles, intimate, trusting arrangements where individual survival depended on group cooperation. In the open savannas of Africa, sleep meant constant potential danger from large predators. Early humans preferred elevated sleeping spots, protective cave mouths, or dense thickets that offered natural shelter. They became experts at reading the landscape for safe sleeping sites. Archaeological excavations of places like Border Cave in South Africa have revealed carefully constructed bedding layers made of grass and ash, some dating back nearly 200,000 years. The ash wasn't random. It acted as a natural insect repellent, an ingenious prehistoric solution to one of sleep's most persistent annoyances. Lunar cycles also played a significant role in prehistoric sleep patterns. Modern studies of the Hods of people show that sleep onset shifts naturally with the phases of the moon. On brighter nights, people tend to stay awake longer, engaging in social activities and storytelling. Our ancestors almost certainly followed similar patterns, adjusting their sleep rhythms to match the available light in the sky. For our prehistoric ancestors, sleep wasn't just about individual rest. It was fundamentally about connection, trust, and community survival. In the profound darkness of pre-electric nights, trust was literally built through shared sleep. Lying vulnerable beside others required mutual dependence and absolute faith in your companions. Over thousands of generations, this nightly proximity likely reinforced social bonds, stabilized group hierarchies, and laid crucial groundwork for the complex cooperative behaviors that would eventually become human culture. Before language fully developed into the sophisticated communication tool we know today, there may have been pre-linguistic rituals tied to sleep, group humming or breathing patterns to synchronize and calm nervous systems. Tactile comfort, gentle touch, shared warmth, the unconscious coordination of breath in the darkness. Dreams whispered into willing ears at dawn, becoming the raw material for early storytelling traditions. Sleep may have been humanity's first truly shared story, a nightly ritual that carried both physical restoration and the deep emotional bonds necessary for group survival. Today, many of us struggle with sleep in ways our ancestors never did. We force ourselves into rigid schedules under harsh artificial light, disconnected from natural rhythms and isolated from the communal comfort our bodies and minds were designed to expect. But perhaps the problem isn't that we're sleeping wrong. It's that we're trying to sleep like modern individuals when our biology is still fundamentally wired for prehistoric community. We evolved for flexible communal sleep patterns, punctuated by natural periods of waking and watching, lulled by firelight, and soothed by the presence of others we trusted completely. Even now, some deep part of us remembers, in those quiet moments before sleep, when the room darkens and your mind begins its gentle drift toward dreams, you might hear it, the distant echo of ancestral nights, the soft crackle of dying flames, the quiet breathing of sleeping companions, the watchful presence that kept our species safe as we learned to dream. This is the sleep we carry in our bones, the rest our DNA remembers. But as human societies grew more complex, as tribes became civilizations and caves gave way to cities, something began to change in how we approach the night. The question that will guide us into our next chapter is this. As humans built temples and marketplaces, as they developed writing and agriculture and the first great cities, what happened to their dreams? What if your dreams were not random, but revelations? What if the moment you closed your eyes each night, you didn't simply fall unconscious, but stepped across a threshold into something sacred? In a world before clocks, before sleep apps and alarms, rest was a ritual. The stars watched over us. The gods whispered through dreams, and sleep was not just surrender to exhaustion. It was a sacred act. Now, let us drift back through millennia, back to temples where priests recorded visions, back to chambers where emperors sought healing through slumber, back to a time when closing your eyes meant opening your soul to forces greater than yourself. In ancient civilizations, sleep was never just biological, it was divine. Imagine sleeping in ancient Egypt, where your dreams were not your own, but messages from Thoth, keeper of wisdom and writing. Each morning, priests would gather around your bedside, listening intently as you recount the visions that visited you in darkness. They would consult the Chester Beatty Papyrus, a sacred manual that cataloged hundreds of dream symbols like a divine dictionary. To drink warm beer in your dreams, they might say, means your worries will soon ease. But to drown in the Nile, that foretells great change ahead. Sleep was not simply falling into bed. It was preparation, purification, opening oneself to receive whatever the gods chose to send. Wealthy Egyptians practiced dream incubation, a ritual where they would fast, bathe, and sleep in special temple chambers beneath the carved gaze of deities. Amulets of Bes, the dwarf god of protection, guarded their souls during the vulnerable hours of night. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets from the Great Library of Nineveh preserved entire taxonomies of dreams. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells us that even heroes needed visions to guide their journeys. Kings kept dream interpreters at court. Priests trained in the language of the subconscious, mediators between the human and divine realms. To dream of eating honey meant prosperity was coming. To dream of falling signified betrayal was near. Sleep was a bridge between gods and mortals, heaven and earth, the seen and unseen worlds. In ancient Greece, sleep belonged to Hypnos, god of slumber, while dreams were shaped by his brother Morpheus. But nowhere was sleep more sacred than in the Asclepian temples, sanctuaries where healing and dreaming became one. Picture yourself as a pilgrim seeking healing. You have traveled far, perhaps from Athens or distant islands, carrying illness, sorrow, or simply questions too heavy for waking hours. First, you purify. You fast. You bathe in sacred springs until your skin tingles with cool water and anticipation. You offer small tokens at the temple gates, whispering your prayers to Asclepius, god of medicine. As darkness deepens, you enter the Abaton, the inner sanctuary where healing sleep awaits. Oil lamps cast gentle light across stone walls carved with serpents, sacred symbols of renewal and medicine. Here, lie on a stone bench with only a thin mat beneath you. You drift into sleep, awaiting a vision. Some dreamers see Asclepius himself, appearing as a kindly physician. Others dream of sacred serpents coiling gently around their bodies, their touch somehow cool and healing. Still others receive cryptic symbols that priests will later interpret as guidance for treatment. In the morning, priests gather your dreams like precious offerings. They blend medicine with mysticism, psychology with prayer. Even Marcus Aurelius, philosopher emperor of Rome, sought healing through temple sleep, believing that in the vulnerable hours of night, divine wisdom could reach the human soul. In these temples, sleep became medicine, and dreams the diagnosis. But temple sleep was only one kind of sacred rest. In the everyday lives of ancient people, sleep followed rhythms we have nearly forgotten. Before gaslight, before electric bulbs, most people practice what we now call biphasic sleep. First sleep and second sleep, separated by a quiet waking hour in the deep of night. Romans called it primus somnus and secundus somnus. You would sleep for perhaps 4 hours after sunset, then naturally wake in the darkest part of night. Not from anxiety or disturbance, but because your body followed the ancient rhythm of darkness and light. This was not lost time, but sacred time, a pause for reflection, prayer, or gentle intimacy. Some wrote letters by candlelight. Others simply lay still, listening to the night sounds, wind through olive trees, distant temple bells, the soft breathing of family nearby. Then, as if drawn by an invisible tide, they would return to sleep until dawn. This was not insomnia, it was rhythm, a time for stillness, prayer, or lovers' whispers in the dark. Where and how you slept was not just comfort, it was identity. In ancient Egypt, the wealthy recline on beds of carved cedar with linen sheets and curved wooden headrests, supports that cradle the neck, and they believed protected the soul from malevolent spirits while the body was vulnerable in sleep. Romans of means enjoyed private cubicula, small bed chambers with soft mattresses of wool or straw. But for most people, sleep was communal. Families shared sleeping spaces with servants, children, even animals. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. Servants and slaves often slept near doorways, both for convenience and as human security, their bodies forming the first barrier between household and danger. During festivals or hot summer nights, people slept wherever it was safe and cool, in courtyards under stars, on rooftops to catch evening breezes, or in the shadow of temple walls where the presence of gods offered protection. Beds were more than furniture. They were stages for life's most important moments. Birth, death, love, illness, and recovery all happened in the same sacred space where sleep restored the soul each night. While the West sought meaning in dreams, the East discovered profound wisdom in sleep's relationship to time and cosmos. In traditional Chinese medicine, your body was not separate from the universe, but a mirror of its rhythms. The Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of medicine, taught that every organ had its sacred hour. From 1 to 3 a.m., the liver filtered blood and emotions, processing the day's experiences. From 3 to 5 a.m., the lungs renewed breath for the day ahead, drawing in fresh qi. If you woke repeatedly at the same hour, this was not random. It was your body speaking, a message from your own internal universe, asking for balance and care. In ancient India, the Upanishad described 3 states of consciousness: Jagrat, waking life; Swapna, the dream state; and Sushupti, deep, dreamless sleep where the individual soul briefly merges with Brahman, the universal spirit. Ayurvedic texts call sleep Nidra, one of the 3 pillars of life alongside food and breath. They prescribe specific sleep times and positions, recommending that people sleep on their left side to aid digestion and balance the body's energies. To the East, sleep was not escape, it was return, a return to harmony, health, and the universal breath that connects all living things. For thousands of years, across continents and cultures, sleep was never just rest. It was connection to gods, to community, to the rhythm of earth and stars. Ancient people prepared for sleep as we might prepare for ceremony. They purified their bodies, calmed their minds, and opened themselves to whatever wisdom the darkness might bring. They slept not in isolation, but in communion, with family, with nature, with forces they believed were greater than themselves. If ancient sleep was sacred, when did we forget? As empires fell and new fears rose, the darkness of night would soon transform. The same hours that once promised divine visions would become something to fear rather than revere. But that transformation from sacred sleep to fearful night is a story that belongs to the medieval world, where sleep would take on entirely new meanings. Tonight, as you prepare for your own rest, perhaps you might ask, what would it mean to approach sleep not as mere unconsciousness, but as a sacred threshold? What wisdom might await you in the quiet spaces between waking and dreaming? The ancient world whispers still, if we know how to listen. What if waking in the middle of the night was the most natural thing in the world? Picture this: a cold stone monastery where shadows dance on ancient walls. A single candle burns, its flame steady against the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls midnight, not as an alarm, but as an invitation. In a nearby village, a peasant family stirs beneath woolen blankets, their eyes opening naturally, calmly, as if summoned by some inner clock older than time itself. This is not insomnia. This is not restlessness. This is simply the medieval night. In the Middle Ages, sleep didn't come in one unbroken wave. It flowed like a gentle tide. First sleep, then a sacred pause, then second sleep. Between these two slumbers lay a quiet hour or two where the world belonged to whispered prayers, tended fires, and the soft intimacy of those who understood that darkness was not empty, but full of possibility. Tonight, we journey back to that divided night, where sleep was both refuge and ritual, where the boundary between waking and dreaming was as permeable as morning mist. When the sun disappeared behind medieval hills, the world didn't fight the darkness. It surrendered to it, without the harsh glare of electric lights, without the blue glow of screens. Night fell like a soft blanket, and bodies naturally followed its rhythm. By 8 or 9 in the evening, families would settle onto their straw mattresses or rope-strung beds. This was first sleep, deep, restorative, lasting until midnight or shortly after. But then, as naturally as breathing, eyes would open, not in panic, not in worry, but in quiet acceptance of this gentle interruption. In this wakeful hour, the medieval night revealed its secrets. A woman might rise to tend the dying embers, adding precious fuel to keep the warmth alive until dawn. A man might check on the animals sheltered beneath the same roof, ensuring their survival through the cold night. Young lovers might share whispered words and gentle touches. Medieval medical texts even recommended this time for conception, when the body was most receptive. Some would simply lie still, reflecting on dreams that felt more vivid in profound darkness, or reciting prayers learned in childhood. The wealthy might light a precious candle and write letters by its flickering flame. The devout might slip into silent meditation, feeling closer to God in the hushed hours when the veil between earthly and divine seemed thinnest. By 1 or 2 in the morning, like a tide returning, second sleep would call them back. Eyes would close once more, and rest would carry them toward dawn. This wasn't a medieval quirk. This was human nature, documented in household manuals, court records, and the literature of the time. When Chaucer wrote of characters waking after their first sleep, he wasn't describing insomnia. He was describing life as it was naturally lived, before artificial light severed our connection to night's ancient rhythms. If you've ever woken at 3 a.m. feeling strangely peaceful rather than anxious, if you've ever experienced that quiet clarity that comes in the deep hours, you may be hearing an echo of this older sleep, a memory carried in your bones from ancestors who understood that night was meant to breathe. In the stone monasteries scattered across medieval Europe, the night was not simply for rest. It was for revelation. The rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, divided the darkness into sacred hours, each marked by bells that called the faithful to prayer regardless of the body's desire for uninterrupted sleep. As Compline, the final prayer of the evening, ended, monks would retire to their sparse dormitories. They slept on wooden planks cushioned only by straw pallets, their rough woolen habits serving as both clothing and blanket. But their rest was brief and intentional. Around midnight, the bell for matins would pierce the silence. In cold stone chapels lit only by oil lamps and candles, the brothers would gather. Their voices would rise in unison, chanting psalms that echoed through vaulted ceilings, creating a sound both earthly and ethereal. The night office, nocturnes, transformed darkness from a time of vulnerability into a space of communion with the divine. This practice wasn't confined to monastic walls. Devout laypeople often adopted similar rhythms, rising in the night for private prayer. Medieval Christianity taught that darkness was spiritually charged, a liminal time when the soul could commune with God more directly, but also when it faced its greatest temptations. Sleep, in the monastic tradition, was necessary but not sacred in itself. Too much sleep invited spiritual laziness. The night watches were acts of discipline, demonstrations of faith that transcended bodily comfort. As one 12th century sermon warned, "Beware the slumber of the body, lest the sleep of the soul follow." Yet there was profound beauty in this interrupted rest. In choosing to wake for prayer, medieval Christians were claiming the night as holy time, transforming what could be hours of helpless unconsciousness into opportunities for spiritual growth. The darkness that frightened others became, for them, a cathedral without walls. But not all of medieval night was sacred calm. In the hours between first and second sleep, when consciousness floated between waking and dreaming, darker visitors were said to prowl. Medieval people feared the night, not just for bandits or wolves that might lurk beyond their doors, but for the spirits that could slip through cracks in dreams themselves. What we now understand as sleep paralysis, that terrifying experience of awakening unable to move, feeling crushed by invisible weight, was interpreted through the lens of spiritual warfare. The morrow was said to sit on sleeping chests, stealing breath and bringing nightmares. In different regions, these night demons took different forms. The succubus that seduced men in their dreams, drawing away life force. The incubus that was blamed for unexplained pregnancies. The old hag of Northern European folklore who brought terror and breathlessness to the vulnerable. Sleep was a time of spiritual danger, when the soul's defenses were lowered. Church records and folk tales describe elaborate protection rituals. Saint medals hung near beds, holy water sprinkled on pillows, bedtime prayers whispered like shields against the dark. Yet even these fears revealed something profound about medieval sleep. It was never seen as mere biological function. Sleep was moral terrain, a nightly journey through landscapes where choices mattered, where virtue and vice battled for the dreaming soul. The terror of night demons reflected deeper anxieties about the powerlessness of sleep, but also its strange intimacy. In dreams, people encounter their deepest desires and fears. The medieval mind, lacking our modern understanding of psychology, explained these nocturnal dramas through stories of spiritual visitation. When morning came, survivors of the night's spiritual battles often felt they had earned their rest, having wrestled with angels and demons in the mysterious country of sleep. Before gas lamps, before electric bulbs, before the harsh convenience of artificial illumination, the medieval world moved to rhythms set by sun and flame. Candles were precious, made of costly tallow or beeswax, and their use was carefully rationed. Most families relied on their hearth as the sole source of light after sunset, its orange glow casting dancing shadows on timber walls. When the fire dimmed embers, the world became a realm of whispers and gentle darkness. This natural lighting shaped not just when people slept, but how they experienced the night. The moon governed nocturnal activities. On clear, bright nights, essential tasks might continue by lunar light, but during the dark of the moon or when clouds obscured the stars, most people remained within their homes, letting darkness be their guide toward rest. The transition to sleep was gradual, following the slow fade of firelight. Eyes adjusted naturally to dimness. Conversations grew softer. The harsh edges of day dissolved into the gentle boundaries of night. In this world without light pollution, darkness was profound. Stars shone with an intensity modern city dwellers rarely see. The night sky was not distant backdrop, but intimate companion. Its patterns as familiar as the rooms of home. This deep darkness made dreams more vivid, meditation more natural, the boundary between conscious and unconscious more permeable. Sleep felt like a descent into mystery rather than merely the end of a day. In medieval homes, sleep was rarely solitary. Privacy was a luxury few could afford, and the night brought family, servants, and sometimes even animals together in shared warmth and mutual protection. For the wealthy nobility, sleep offered some separation from the world. In stone castles and manor houses, four-poster beds rose like islands of comfort, draped with curtains of wool or velvet that blocked both drafts and curious eyes. These elevated sleeping spaces were filled with precious materials: goose feathers, fine wool, linen sheets that spoke of status and wealth. But for most medieval people, sleep was communal and practical. In small cottages, entire families shared sleeping space near the hearth, bodies pressed together for warmth during harsh winter months. Children nestled between parents, grandparents curled nearby, and sometimes servants or apprentices found their rest in the same room. The beds themselves were marvels of practicality. Straw mattresses laid on rope-strung frames that required nightly tightening. The origin of our phrase, sleep tight. Archaeological studies reveal homes with no separate bedrooms, just multi-purpose spaces where cooking, working, and sleeping all occurred in intimate proximity. Even in monasteries, despite their spiritual focus on solitude, sleep was communal. Monks rested in dormitories called dormitoriums, lying side by side on simple pallets, heads often covered with hoods to maintain modesty while sharing the vulnerable state of sleep. This social dimension of medieval sleep created its own intimacies, shared breathing in small spaces, the comfort of knowing others were near during the dark hours, quiet conversations that might begin as one person stirred between first and second sleep, drawing others into gentle dialogue. Sleep was not escape from community, but deepening of it, a nightly reminder that survival depended on trust, warmth, and the willingness to be vulnerable together. As we rest here in the shadow of medieval night, consider what was lost when we began to see sleep as inconvenience rather than sacred pause. Before clocks dictated rigid schedules, before caffeine allowed us to fight our natural rhythms, before electric light severed our connection to darkness, sleep flowed like water, shaped by bell towers and candlelight, by prayer and seasonal change. The medieval night was not perfect. It held genuine dangers, cold, hunger, disease, and the very real threats that prowl beyond cottage walls. But it also held something we have largely forgotten: the understanding that darkness is not empty space to be filled with artificial light, but rich time to be lived with intention. In their segmented sleep, medieval people found natural rhythms that honor both body and spirit. In their night prayers, they claimed the darkness as sacred time. In their shared sleeping spaces, they created intimacy that transcended privacy. In their fears of night demons, they acknowledged sleep's mysterious power to reveal the hidden landscapes of the soul. Perhaps most remarkably, they understood that sleep was not simply the absence of waking, but a different kind of presence, a way of being in a world that was just as valid, just as necessary as the daylight hours. But even as we honor the wisdom of medieval night, we must ask what happened next. How did humanity begin to challenge the ancient rhythms of darkness and light? What forces would eventually convince us that night could be conquered, that sleep could be controlled, that the gentle tide of first and second sleep was somehow insufficient for the ambitions of the modern world? As candles burned low in medieval homes and the second sleep called weary bodies back to rest, few could imagine the revolution that was coming. A time when light would no longer fade, when clocks would govern sleep more than stars, when the sacred pause between first and second slumber will be forgotten, replaced by the relentless march of measured time. The age of reason was approaching, bringing with it new questions about the nature of sleep, consciousness, and the very meaning of being human. But that transformation, and the price we paid for it, awaits us in the centuries ahead. There was a time when nightfall meant stillness, a hush beneath the stars that had governed human rest since the beginning of time. For thousands of years, darkness was absolute. When the sun disappeared behind the horizon, the world exhaled into sleep. But what happens to the night when the flame keeps burning? Somewhere between the years 1500 and 1800, in the flicker of a single candle, everything began to change. Not with thunder or upheaval, but with light. Gentle, persistent, revolutionary light. Picture a merchant's home in 16th century Florence. Outside, the streets lie in familiar darkness. But inside, a beeswax candle burns steady and fragrant, casting golden shadows across parchment and silk. The night no longer ends a day, it extends it. For the first time in human history, the dark began to obey us. In the growing cities of Europe, London, Paris, Amsterdam, windows began to glow long after sunset. Oil lamps flickered in taverns. Lanterns swayed in alleyways. And in the homes of those who could afford them, mirrors reflected candlelight back into rooms, doubling the precious illumination. This was luxury made manifest. A single evening's worth of candles could cost a laborer days of wages. In French and English households, servants carefully rationed each wick, recording in ledgers how many flames were lit, how long they burned, and who was granted the privilege of reading or sewing by their glow. But for those who possessed this golden currency of night, Sleep became optional. Aristocrats gathered for late-night salons, their conversations stretching toward midnight. Scholars read in their bedchambers, turning pages by flickering light. And slowly, imperceptibly, the ancient rhythm that had governed human rest began to bend. Listen, can you hear it? The subtle shift as biological time yields to social time. The night was no longer a boundary between waking and sleep. It had become a beginning, but light was only the first messenger change. Soon came another revolution, quieter but perhaps more profound: the mechanical measurement of time itself. In medieval Europe, church bells have been the great regulator, ringing out the canonical hours for prayer, marking the rhythm of monastic life. But by the 1500s, something new began to echo through market squares and city streets. Clocks, public timepieces mounted on towers and churches, their bells tolling not just for worship, but for curfews, labor shifts, and a precise scheduling of daily life. In London and Amsterdam, clockmakers flourished, selling personal watches and household timepieces to the rising merchant classes. And in private homes, a new sound joined the symphony of night: the steady, relentless ticking of gears. Time became something external, imposed, mechanical, unyielding. As one 17th century Parisian wrote in his diary, "The bell calls me to bed before my eyes feel heavy, and calls me to rise before I am ready." Now the night had a schedule, and the body began to follow the bell. Printed almanacs advised proper sleep routines, often suggesting 7 to 8 hours in a single uninterrupted block. The ancient rhythm of first sleep, waking, and second sleep, that gentle dance between consciousness and dreams, began its slow fade into memory. In the growing cities of Europe, another change was stirring. The night, once a sanctuary of silence, was becoming crowded. London swelled to 200,000 souls, then 400,000. Paris burst beyond its medieval walls. Amsterdam's canals echoed with commerce day and night. And in these urban hearts, darkness no longer guaranteed peace. Close your eyes and imagine 18th century London after sunset. Cartwheels rattling across cobblestones, dogs barking in narrow alleys, night watchmen calling the hour, drunken revelers singing bawdy songs, and from upper windows, the occasional splash and curse as chamber pots are emptied onto the streets below. James Boswell, that chronicler of urban life, wrote in 1763 of lying awake in London, disturbed by the rattle of coaches and the loudness of voices. In Florence, court records show neighbors suing each other over nocturnal disturbances, banging shutters, loud quarrels that stretched past midnight. For the working classes, sleep became something to protect rather than simply surrender to. Poor families shared single mattresses, slept in shifts, or made do with straw pallets near the dying embers of cooking fires. In cramped quarters above workshops and markets, rest was stolen in fragments between the noise of neighbors and the demands of dawn labor. Sleep was no longer a retreat from the world. It was something to defend against it. And yet, the old rhythm persisted. Even as candles burned and clocks ticked, historical records throughout the 17th and 18th centuries continue to describe that ancient pattern. First sleep, a wakeful interlude, then second sleep. During those midnight hours of gentle consciousness, families would stoke the dying embers of their fires. They would pray, read scriptures by dim light, or recite familiar psalms. Parents tended to crying infants. Lovers shared quiet intimacy, and sometimes Neighbors would visit cross-garden walls or through connecting doors, speaking in hushed tones about the day's events or tomorrow's concerns. Physicians of the era didn't consider this midnight waking a problem to be solved. They recommended it as healthy practice, allowing the body to cool and the mind to settle between sleeps. As Roger Kirch, the great historian of sleep, reminds us, midnight waking was once a rhythm, not a problem. But as artificial lighting spread and clocks demanded more rigid schedules, this natural division of sleep gradually compressed. The modern expectation of single, uninterrupted slumber was beginning to take hold, though the old ways still lingered in villages and countryside, where darkness remained absolute and time still followed the seasons. In the middle of this transformation came another quiet revolutionary: coffee. The first English coffee house opened in Oxford in 1650, followed quickly by London in 1652. Within decades, these establishments had spread across Europe: Paris, Vienna, Venice, each one a warm beacon extending deep into the night hours. These were not merely places to drink a new beverage. They became penny universities, where for the price of a cup, scholars and merchants, revolutionaries and artists could engage in hours of intellectual exchange. Here, people read newspapers by lamplight, debated philosophy until midnight, and struck business deals over the bitter, energizing brew. Caffeine extended wakefulness in ways that candlelight alone could not. The stimulant didn't just push back physical darkness, it awakened the mind, making late-night activity not just possible, but fashionable, productive, even necessary. As one 18th century traveler observed, at midnight, the coffee house is more alive than the streets. For the first time in human history, the night became an option, not just a necessity of rest, but a choice of engagement with the world. As sleep changed, so did the spaces and rituals surrounding it. Rest itself became a reflection of status, wealth, and social position. For the wealthy, sleep transformed into an elaborate ceremony of comfort and display. Private bedrooms featured heavy curtains and rich tapestries to block drafts and prying eyes. Four-poster beds, carved and gilded, stood draped in velvet or silk. Attendants helped with the intricate process of disrobing, hair preparation, and evening prayers. Beds were scented with imported lavender or rose petals, their sheets woven from the finest linens. These weren't simply practical arrangements. They were theater, statement of power and refinement enacted each night behind closed doors. Meanwhile, for the poor and working classes, sleep remained communal and utterly practical. Entire families shared single mattresses or straw pallets. Rooms served multiple purposes. Cooking, working, and sleeping overlapped in cramped quarters. In rural areas, people often shared sleeping spaces with livestock or apprentices, huddled together for warmth and economy. The gap between rich and poor was felt even in unconsciousness, not just in comfort, but in time itself. The wealthy could afford leisurely, extended evenings, while the poor stole what rest they could between labor and dawn. As one English proverb from a period captured it, for the wealthy, sleep was ritual. For the poor, it was whatever rest the body could steal. To sleep alone in silence, in a private room with clean sheets and undisturbed darkness, this was not just comfort, this was class. And so, between 1500 and 1800, something fundamental shifted in the human relationship with rest and darkness. Candles pushed back the ancient sovereignty of night. Clocks imposed external rhythms over internal biology. Cities filled the darkness with noise and activity. Coffee extended consciousness beyond its natural limits, and sleep itself became a marker of social position rather than simple biological necessity. The segmented sleep that had sustained our species for millennia began its slow dissolution, compressed gradually into the single block of unconsciousness that most of us now consider normal and struggle to maintain. But this was only the beginning. Light changed our nights. Clocks changed our sleep. Coffee changed our consciousness. But soon, in the great mills and factories of the Industrial Revolution, machines would change everything. The night was learning to bend to human will. Soon, it would learn to break entirely. In the growing darkness of history, we can see the threads of our modern sleep crisis beginning to weave together. Technology and social change, progress and loss, the eternal tension between what the body needs and what the world demands. Rest well, knowing that even in change, some rhythms endure. Even as the night learned new songs, it never forgot its oldest purpose: to give us sanctuary, to give us dreams, and to return us always to the gentle country of sleep. There was a time when the world slept in harmony with the dark. When twilight fell, candles flickered to life, gentle flames that danced with shadows, expensive enough to ration, warm enough to gather around. Night had weight then. It had presence. It whispered, "Rest now." But what happens when night never truly falls? In 1879, Thomas Edison captured lightning in a glass bulb. His incandescent light didn't just illuminate rooms. It rewrote the ancient contract between humanity and darkness. For the first time in human history, we could choose when to sleep. More importantly, we could choose when not to. A world once ruled by sun and stars now bowed to the socket. The transformation was swift. By the 1890s, cities like New York and London began to glow, first in shop windows, then in homes, finally bleeding into the streets themselves. Electric light was cheaper than oil, safer than flame, brighter than anything our ancestors had ever known. But there was a cost, invisible at first. That gentle bulb suppressed melatonin, the ancient hormone that whispered sleep to our bones. Our circadian clocks, calibrated over millennia to firelight and starlight, began to stutter. Edison himself mocked sleep, calling it a heritage from our cave days. He boasted of needing only 4 hours a night, as if rest were a weakness to overcome rather than a rhythm to honor. The night, once sacred and still, had become negotiable. For thousands of years, humans had slept in two gentle waves: first sleep and second sleep, with a peaceful hour of wakefulness in between. That midnight hour was for prayer, for quiet conversation, for dreams that needed tending. But the factory whistle had no patience for ancient rhythms. Sleep, once a sacred dance with darkness, now had to punch in. The new world demanded something unprecedented: consolidated sleep. 8 hours. No more, no less. Not because our bodies asked for it, but because the machine required it. Workers could no longer rise naturally in the dark hour between sleeps. They couldn't follow the seasonal ebb and flow of rest. Sleep became compressed, standardized, scheduled, squeezed into whatever hours the factory floor would spare. The gentle pulse of first and second sleep faded into memory, replaced by something harder: the alarm. Picture this: Lowell, Massachusetts, 1840s. The mill girls, young women who left their farms for factory work. Wake not to roosters or sunlight, but to the mechanical shriek of the factory bell. 5:30 in the morning, 12-hour shifts. Sleep carved into whatever remained after labor, after chores, after the bare necessities of survival. In the textile mills of Manchester, the steelworks of Pittsburgh, the coal mines of Wales, human rhythms bent to match the machine's hunger. The body's natural clock, evolved over millions of years, was suddenly expected to conform to something unprecedented: industrial time. No longer could workers sleep with the seasons. No longer could they rest when their bodies whispered now. Sleep became a commodity, rationed, measured, always insufficient. The ideal promised 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. But reality offered something harsher. 14-hour shifts, night work that turned circadian rhythms inside out, rest stolen in fragments between the whistle's call. One industrial worker wrote in his diary, "I sleep when I can. The bell rings and I rise, whether my body is ready or not. Waking not with the sun, but with the scream of the whistle." In 1787, Levi Hutchins built something the world had never needed before: a machine to force awakening. His mechanical alarm clock rang precisely at 4 a.m., not because his body naturally woke then, but because industry demanded it. By the late 1800s, mass-produced alarm clocks sat on nightstands across America and Europe like small, ticking tyrants. The alarm clock symbolized something profound: the end of natural waking. For millennia, humans had risen with internal clocks calibrated to light, to season, to the gentle progression from dream to consciousness. Now, a mechanical shriek decided when sleep ended. How many of us, even today, still wake by choice? The alarm didn't just wake us. It trained us to distrust our own rhythms, to believe that natural rest was somehow insufficient. In the great factories of the Industrial Revolution, production ran in shifts. Day workers yielded to night workers in endless rotation. The machine never rested, and neither could its keepers. Textile workers in Birmingham shared beds in boarding houses. Night shift workers sleeping in sheets still warm from day shift workers who'd just risen. Railroad engineers worked around the clock schedules that scrambled their internal clocks. Coal miners descended into perpetual darkness, their bodies never sure if it was day or night above ground. Sleep became fragmented, not by the gentle rhythm of first and second sleep, but by the brutal demands of the factory floor. Steel workers endured 12-hour shifts rotating between days and nights, leading to what doctors would later recognize as rotating shift disorder. Though they had no name for it then, they only knew the bone-deep exhaustion, the accidents that came from minds fuzzy with sleep debt, the way rest never quite felt restorative. The machine never slept, so neither could its keepers. One physician's notes from 1904 captured the human cost. The patient reports a constant weariness, unable to sleep soundly, mind racing with the machinery of his day. As industrial fatigue mounted, doctors began to intervene. Sleep was no longer seen as a natural mystery. It became a medical concern, a problem to be solved. The term sleep hygiene appeared in early 20th century medical literature. Suddenly there were rules for rest, quiet rooms, regular bedtimes, avoidance of stimulants, guidelines that seemed rooted in health but also served industry, ensuring workers were rested enough to be productive, but not indulgent enough to be unprofitable. Insomnia became a diagnosis rather than a spiritual concern. Restlessness became a medical condition rather than the soul's natural response to an unnatural world. Sleep laboratories emerged, like Nathaniel Kleitman's pioneering work at the University of Chicago. Sleep was dissected, measured, categorized, turned into data like everything else in the industrial age. In the name of progress, the night was being regimented, just like the day. But perhaps the most profound change was cultural. In industrial society, sleep became morally loaded, a marker character, of virtue, of worth. Benjamin Franklin's mantra echoed through schools and sermons. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Samuel Smiles' 1859 bestseller Self-Help equated early rising with success, painting oversleeping as moral failure. Sleep, once honored as necessary communion with the unconscious, became suspect. Too much rest was laziness. Natural rhythms were weakness. The Protestant work ethic had colonized even our dreams. Edison's boast, sleeping only 4 hours, wasn't just practical advice. It was a new kind of heroism, the conquest of biological need by industrial will. In this new world, idleness was sin and sleep was dangerously close to idleness. The human cost was written in letters home, in factory reports, in the growing medical literature on nervous exhaustion. Mill girls in Massachusetts wrote of bone-deep tiredness that no amount of Sunday rest could cure. Welsh miners slept in 3-hour fragments between dangerous shifts underground. Factory workers dozed standing up, only to jolt awake at the foreman's step. One labor reformer observed in 1888, "The whistle of the factory has replaced the rooster's crow. Sleep is no longer tied to nature but to commerce." These weren't just individual struggles. They were symptoms of a civilization learning to override its own biological wisdom. We lit the night to chase progress. We built machines that could work without rest. We created wealth beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. But what did we lose in the light? We lost a quiet hour between first and second sleep. That sacred time for reflection, for dreams half remembered, for conversations with the darkness itself. We lost the seasonal rhythms that once connected our rest to the turning world. We lost the trust in our own body's wisdom about when to wake and when to rest. Most profoundly, we lost the understanding of sleep as something sacred rather than something to overcome. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how we work. It rewrote the most ancient human rhythm of all. Sleep, once a dance with darkness, became a negotiation with the machine. By the early 20th century, the world had entered a new era of sleep, compressed, scheduled, and perpetually insufficient. Workers learned to override their bodies. Doctors learned to measure their exhaustion. Society learned to fear laziness more than fatigue. In the shadow of factory smokestacks and under the glare of electric light, something essential had been lost. But perhaps it could be rediscovered, not through ancient wisdom, but through new understanding. It would take laboratories filled with sleeping subjects, electrodes recording brain waves, and decades of patient research to help us remember what sleep truly is. The age of sleep science was about to begin. By the 20th century, we had wired the world with light, time, and machines. But then we turned inward and asked, what really happens when we close our eyes? Picture this: a darkened room, electrodes delicately placed on a sleeping scalp, machines humming quietly in the corners, translating dreams into data, rest into rhythms. For the first time in human history, we could watch the mind while the body slept. The sleeping body becomes a map of electrical storms, gentle waves, and mysterious journeys we take 8 times each night. This is where folklore became physiology, where mystery became medicine, where the ancient art of sleep became modern science. In a small laboratory at the University of Chicago in the 1920s, a Russian-born scientist named Nathaniel Kleitman did something extraordinary. He made sleep his life's work. Sometimes he floated in saltwater tanks, testing how our internal clocks tick. Other nights, he stayed awake for days, documenting what happens when we push beyond exhaustion. He even published the first comprehensive textbook on sleep science in 1939, a field that barely existed when he began. Kleitman believed something radical, that sleep wasn't just emptiness. It wasn't the brain simply switching off like a light. Instead, he suspected sleep was active, complex, cyclical, not just rest, but a process. We once dreamed under stars, guided by instinct and tradition. Now we dreamed under fluorescent lights, while machines listened to our minds. In Germany and America, scientists developed the electroencephalograph, the EEG. For the first time, they could watch brain waves dance across paper, creating the first visual poetry of sleep. And what they saw changed everything. 1953, a graduate student named Eugene Aserinsky was watching his young son sleep, electrodes carefully placed, when he noticed something extraordinary. Beneath closed eyelids, the eyes were moving, racing back and forth like they were watching an invisible tennis match. And the brain? It was as active as if the child were wide awake. This was REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the realm where dreams live. Suddenly, sleep had architecture. Kleitman, Aserinsky, and their colleague William Dement mapped the nightly journey. First, light sleep, the gentle drift downward, then deeper waves where the body repairs itself, and finally, REM, where the mind processes dreams and weaves the day's experiences into memory. Sleep was no longer a void. It was a symphony with rising crescendos and silent rests. Each night, we cycle through this dance. Light sleep, deep sleep, dream, repeat like tides in the brain. The mystery that had puzzled humans for millennia now had stages, patterns, and electrical signatures. But understanding sleep would soon mean trying to control it. By the 1960s, those small laboratories had grown into something bigger. Sleep clinics. Hospitals began building specialized rooms where people could sleep while being watched, measured, and diagnosed. Polysomnography became the new art, tracking brain waves, eye movements, muscle tension, breathing, and oxygen levels all at once. The sleeping person became a constellation of data points. Doctors discovered disorders that had names now. Sleep apnea, where the airway collapses in the night. Narcolepsy, where sleep arrives without invitation. Restless leg syndrome, where the body can't find stillness. Dr. Colin Sullivan invented the CPAP machine in 1981, a gentle mask that keeps airways open, allowing millions to breathe freely through the night. William Dement founded the first sleep disorders clinic at Stanford, declaring, "You're not healthy unless your sleep is healthy." Sleep, once the realm of dreams and superstition, was now medicalized. Doctors prescribed sleep hygiene routines. Insurance companies began billing for sleep studies. The pharmacy shelves filled with solutions. First barbiturates, then benzodiazepines, later melatonin, the hormone of darkness, isolated in 1958, but not sold over the counter until the 1990s. The sleep clinic became a new kind of sacred space, not for prophecy, but for data. But what does it mean when we need machines to sleep? As sleep science grew, so did something else, the 8-hour sleep ideal. 8 hours for work, 8 for rest, 8 for what we will, the old labor reformers' slogan from the 19th century. As factories shaped the modern workday, sleep was compressed into one block, tied to the industrial schedule. Public health campaigns promoted 8 hours as the gold standard. Hospitals, schools, the military, and corporations all adopted the model. It became both scientific truth and social expectation. But historians began to ask, is 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep truly natural? For millennia, people practiced biphasic sleep, 2 sleeps with a waking period between. In agricultural societies, they often slept early, woke at midnight to pray, write, or talk with neighbors, then slept again until dawn. As sleep researcher Benjamin Rice wondered, what if the gold standard of sleep was built not on biology, but on the factory floor? The question lingers in the quiet spaces between what science discovered and what society demanded. As sleep became measurable, it also became moralized. Thomas Edison famously slept 3 to 4 hours and called sleep a waste of time. Nikola Tesla, Margaret Thatcher, and more recently, figures like Elon Musk became cultural icons of sleepless innovation. Society celebrated slogans that turned rest into weakness. You snooze, you lose. Sleep when you're dead. The early bird gets the worm. Corporate culture glorified the grind. To rest was lazy. To sleep in was shameful. The dreamer became inefficient. Yet quietly, medical studies showed the cost. Sleep deprivation impairs memory, mood, and decision-making. Long-term sleep loss increases the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and early death. But the myth persisted, embedded in our productivity-obsessed culture. Sleep less, achieve more. The very scientists who were proving sleep's importance lived in a world that increasingly devalued it. By the late 20th century, something curious happened. Sleep became a product. The mattress industry exploded with promises of perfect rest. Brands like Tempur-Pedic and Sleep Number turned beds into technology. Weighted blankets, white noise machines, smartwatches that track sleep stages. Suddenly, rest required. Equipment. Apps appeared. Calm and Headspace offered sleep stories and meditations. Social media filled with sleep coaches teaching millions to optimize their bedtime routines. Melatonin supplements, CBD oils, adaptogens. The nightly ritual expanded into a full consumer experience. We spend billions of dollars learning to sleep. Yet paradoxically, the more we try to engineer perfect rest, the more anxious we became about not getting it. Doctors even coined a new term, orthosomnia, the obsession with getting perfect sleep, often making sleep worse. As researcher Matthew Wolfmeyer observed, in our attempt to fix sleep, we've medicalized, monetized, and moralized it, perhaps losing the simple experience of rest along the way. Here we stand at the end of the 20th century, at the threshold of the digital age. We've decoded the patterns of sleep, mapped its stages, created machines to measure every breath, every brain wave, every moment of rest. We know more about sleep than any generation in human history. And yet, We struggle more than ever to find it. We've turned the most natural human experience into a problem to be solved, a performance to be optimized, a commodity to be purchased. Maybe sleep isn't something we conquer. Maybe it's not a system we hack or a goal we achieve. Maybe sleep is something we remember the way water remembers the shape of a riverbed, the way night remembers darkness, even in a world of artificial light. As we move into the 21st century, into the age of smartphones and social media, of 24-hour news cycles and global connectivity, the questions grow deeper. If we've learned so much about sleep, why are we still so tired? What happens when the very technology that helped us understand sleep begins to steal it from us? In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how the digital revolution both promised to solve our sleep problems and created new ones we never imagined. Every breath you take while sleeping is part of an ancient rhythm that no machine can replicate, no app can optimize, and no expert can fully explain. Sleep remains, despite all our knowledge, beautifully mysterious. We track our sleep. We chart our dreams. We build apps to wake us gently. And yet, we wake up tired. Here's the great paradox of our time. We've never understood sleep better than we do right now. We know about REM cycles and circadian rhythms. We've mapped the brain during dreams. We can measure sleep stages down to the minute. And yet, somehow, sleep has never felt more elusive. This is the story of how knowledge and rest became strangers. How the more we learned about sleep, the further it drifted from us. It's the story of a world that never stops glowing, and the ancient rhythm that got lost in the light. Picture this. It's 11 p.m. You're in bed, phone in hand, scrolling through one last email, one final Instagram story, just one more TikTok video. The screen bathes your face in a cool blue glow. Your brain, deep in its ancient wisdom, receives this light and thinks, morning, sunrise, time to wake up. But it's not morning. It's the middle of the night. Scientists at Harvard discovered something remarkable. Blue light, the kind that pours from our phones and laptops, suppresses melatonin twice as much as green light of equal brightness. Melatonin, the hormone that whispers to your body, it's time to rest. We carry tiny suns in our pockets, and every night we hold them inches from our eyes, telling our brains it's dawn when the world outside is dark. The Sleep Research Society calls this our midnight scroll, a ritual our ancient biology never anticipated. Our ancestors knew only one kind of light after sunset, the warm flicker of fire. Now we bathe ourselves in artificial daylight until the moment we expect to fall asleep. Have you ever noticed how you can feel exhausted all day, but the moment you pick up your phone in bed, you suddenly feel awake? That's not willpower failing you. That's 200,000 years of human evolution, confused by a 5-inch screen. We've tried to solve this. Blue light filters, night mode, amber glasses, tech curfews. But the problem isn't just the light. It's what we're consuming in that light. The endless scroll of news, the urgent emails, the social feeds that keep our minds racing long after our bodies beg for rest. As one sleep researcher put it, we've turned our bedrooms into command centers and then wonder why we can't power down. Somewhere along the way, we started wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor. Sleep is for the weak became the rallying cry of starter culture. Elon Musk tweeted about sleeping on Tesla factory floors. Influencers post their 4 a.m. wake-up routines as proof of dedication. We celebrate the entrepreneur who works 80-hour weeks and the student who pulls all-nighters. We traded dreams for deadlines. This is what sociologists call hustle culture. The idea that your worth is measured by your wakefulness. That rest is laziness. That sleep is time stolen from success. But here's what we've learned. The brain that skips sleep isn't sharper, it's stumbling. After just one night of poor sleep, your cognitive performance drops by 40%. Your emotional regulation crumbles. Your immune system weakens. And yet we live in a world that rewards this self-destruction. The global economy doesn't sleep. Stock markets trade around the clock. Gig workers drive through the night. We answer emails at midnight and attend Zoom calls across time zones. Our bodies confused about which hemisphere they're supposed to be awake in. Scientists have a term for this: social jet lag. It's the constant misalignment between when your body wants to sleep and when society demands you be awake. Unlike travel jet lag, you don't need to cross time zones to experience it. You just need to exist in the modern world. As one writer beautifully put it, today we travel across time zones without leaving our bed, chasing productivity while leaving our sleep behind. Have you ever lain awake at night? Not because you weren't tired, but because you were tired of everything? The racing thoughts, the mental replay of the day's mistakes, the anxiety about tomorrow's obligations, the overwhelming sense that your mind simply won't stop. You're not alone in this. The American Psychological Association documented something unprecedented during the pandemic: a global spike in insomnia, anxiety-driven wakefulness, and what researchers now call coronasomnia. But the pandemic didn't create our sleep anxiety. It just revealed how fragile our rest had already become. When the world slowed down in 2020, our minds sped up. Rates of clinical insomnia rose by 40% in some groups. Healthcare workers lay awake worrying about patients. Parents juggled work and homeschooling, their sleep fractured by impossible demands. Even those who had nowhere to go found themselves lying awake, minds buzzing with uncertainty. Sleep used to be an escape from the world. Now, for many, it's where the world follows us into our dreams, into our darkest hours, into the space that was once sacred and separate. The irony is heartbreaking. The more we need rest, the harder it becomes to find. Here's a question that might surprise you. Are we living in a time zone our bodies weren't designed for? Most of us experience something called social jet lag, and we don't even realize it. It happens when your natural sleep rhythm crashes into the schedule society imposes on you. Maybe you're naturally a night owl, but your job starts at 8 a.m. Maybe your body wants to sleep at 9 p.m., but your social life doesn't start until 10. Maybe you sleep in on weekends to catch up, only to find yourself wide awake Sunday night, dreading Monday morning. This constant mismatch between biological time and social time creates a low-level exhaustion that follows millions of people through their days. The World Health Organization links this misalignment to obesity, mood disorders, and cognitive decline. We're not just tired, we're chronically out of sync with ourselves. And it's getting worse. In a globalized world, work never sleeps. We attend meetings with colleagues in different hemispheres. We answer emails from 3 time zones away. The boundaries between day and night blur until we're living in a perpetual state of temporal confusion. Our ancestors lived by the rhythm of the sun. We live by the rhythm of everything else. Sleep, once a shared biological need, has become a divided social experience. Not everyone has access to the luxury of worrying about blue light filters or sleep tracking apps. For millions, the barriers to rest are more fundamental. Sirens instead of silence, streetlights flooding through thin curtains, stress that doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. A 2020 CDC report revealed stark disparities. Black Americans and Latinx communities sleep significantly less than white populations on average. Lower income workers report more sleep debt and chronic fatigue. Environmental factors, air pollution, proximity to highways, noise from airports, disproportionately impact communities that were already struggling. Imagine trying to sleep when sirens wail outside your window every few hours. Your neighbor's shift work means footsteps overhead at 2 a.m. Stress about paying rent keeps your nervous system on high alert. You work multiple jobs with schedules that change weekly. Sleep inequality reveals something uncomfortable about our society. Rest isn't just about individual choices or sleep hygiene. It's about having a safe, quiet, dark place to lay your head. It's about economic security that allows your nervous system to truly relax. As one researcher put it, not everyone sleeps beneath silence. Some sleep under sirens, neon, and stress. The right to rest, it turns out, isn't equally distributed. Even when we do everything right, even when we put away our phones, dim the lights, and climb into bed at a reasonable hour, the world around us might not cooperate. Our cities never truly sleep. Light pollution washes out the stars and seeps through our windows. The constant hum of traffic, air conditioners, and electronics creates a baseline of noise our ancestors never knew. We regulate our indoor temperatures so precisely that our bodies never experience the natural cooling that signals sleep. Researchers call this environmental sleep disruption. When the world itself becomes a barrier to rest, urban dwellers are exposed to light levels at night that would have been unimaginable just a century ago. The average city is hundreds of times brighter after dark than it was before electric lighting. And then there's noise. The World Health Organization considers environmental noise one of the top threats to public health, not just because it keeps us awake, but because it fragments the sleep we do get. Even sound that don't fully wake us can pull us out of deep sleep stages, leaving us tired despite spending 8 hours in bed. We've created a world that's always on, always glowing, always humming. And then we wonder why our ancient sleep systems struggle to adapt. In response to all this sleep chaos, we did what humans always do. We tried to innovate our way out of the problem. Enter the quantified sleep movement. Hour rings that track your REM cycles. Whoop bands that measure recovery. Apple watches that promise to optimize your rest. Smart mattresses that adjust firmness based on your sleep stages. AI sleep coaches that analyze your patterns and provide personalized advice. We've turned sleep from an experience into a performance metric. And while this technology has taught us fascinating things about individual sleep patterns, it's also created new anxieties. Doctors now warn about orthosomnia, the stress of not sleeping well enough according to your tracker. Have you ever woken up feeling rested, only to check your sleep score and suddenly feel tired? Have you ever lain awake worrying about whether you get enough deep sleep to hit your recovery goals? We're measuring our sleep more precisely than ever, but are we sleeping better? Or are we just quantifying our failure more accurately? Some studies suggest that consumer sleep tracking isn't always reliable, especially for REM stages. And there are growing concerns about data privacy. Companies collecting intimate details about when we sleep, how we move, what makes us restless. MIT's technology review captured it perfectly. We've turned sleep from an experience into a performance. The question is, are we performing better rest or just performing the idea of rest? In the search for better sleep, some people are looking backward to move forward. Polyphasic sleep, sleeping in multiple short bursts instead of one long stretch, has gained a cult following in Silicon Valley, military operations, and among long-haul drivers. The Huberman schedule, 6 20-minute naps spread throughout the day. The everyman method, a short core sleep plus strategic power naps. Proponents claim they feel more alert, more productive, more aligned with their natural rhythms. But long-term studies are scarce, and most sleep scientists warn about cognitive decline and health risks from chronic polyphasic sleep. But here's the fascinating part. This might not be innovation at all. Historian Roger Kurtz discovered that our ancestors commonly practiced first sleep and second sleep, a natural biphasic pattern, where people would sleep for a few hours, wake for an hour or two in the middle of the night, then return to sleep until morning. Maybe these modern sleep hackers aren't inventing new rhythms. They're remembering old ones that industrialization made us forget. The question isn't whether these schedules work, but what they represent. A growing desperation to find rest in a restless world, even if it means abandoning the sleep patterns we've been told are normal. And so we arrive at the great irony of the digital age. We've never known so much about sleep and never slept so little, so anxiously. We can measure REM latency down to the second, but we lie awake scrolling through our phones. We understand circadian biology better than any generation in history, but we work night shifts in cross-time zones digitally. We've identified the exact wavelengths of light that disrupt melatonin, but our bedrooms glow with screens until the moment we close our eyes. We've medicalized sleep, optimized it, gamified it, and commodified it. We've turned it into a problem to be solved rather than a natural state to be entered. Knowledge, it turns out, is not the same as wisdom. Understanding is not the same as peace. Maybe the crisis isn't that we don't know how to sleep. Maybe the crisis is that we've forgotten how to let go of control, of optimization, of the need to make even our rest productive. So where does this leave us? Standing at the edge of tomorrow, holding devices that connect us to everything and everyone, but struggling to connect with the simple act of closing our eyes. We've tried to innovate our way to better sleep. We've tracked it, hacked it, scheduled it, and medicated it. We bought special mattresses and downloaded meditation apps and installed blue light filters. But what if the solution isn't in the next sleep innovation? What if it's not in the data or the devices or the perfect evening routine? What if the answer lies in remembering something we've almost forgotten? That sleep is not a problem to be solved, but a surrender to be embraced. Can we innovate our way back to peace? Or must we remember what rest truly is? The future of sleep is being written right now, in laboratories and bedrooms, in Silicon Valley startups and ancient wisdom traditions. Some are building tomorrow's sleep solutions. Others are rediscovering yesterday's forgotten truths. And somewhere between knowing and unknowing, between technology and biology, between the ancient rhythm of rest and the relentless pulse of the modern world. We've mapped the dreams. We've decoded the rhythms. Now we ask, can we engineer rest, or will rest reawaken us? For thousands of years, sleep was simple. A darkened room, a body at rest, a mind adrift in dreams. But as we move deeper into the 21st century, sleep is no longer just something we do. It's something we design. The night is becoming a frontier of innovation, shaped by technology, biology, culture, and choice. Let's drift forward, not just into sleep, but into the future of sleep itself. Imagine this. Your bedroom no longer just waits for you to sleep. It learns from you. It adjusts senses and curates rest, like a silent caretaker watching over your dreams. This is the rise of AI-regulated sleep environments. Your smart thermostat already adjusts room temperature to match your circadian rhythms, cooling your body to prepare for deep sleep. Tunable LED lights simulate sunset, dimming to amber hues before bed and brightening like dawn in the morning, resetting your biological clock with the patience of nature herself. We once watched the stars and know when to rest. Now our ceiling glows with programmed moonlight. Systems monitor your breathing, your heart rate, your movements, learning your patterns like a devoted lover who knows exactly when you're ready to let go. Your wearable devices whisper data to your smart mattress, adjusting softness, temperature, and ambient sound in real time. But with this intimacy comes new questions. Who owns your sleep data? Can we trust algorithms to know what's restful for a human soul? Will we become so reliant on machines to monitor rest that we forget how to feel intuitively? As one sleep scientist put it, we are moving from bedrooms that shelter us to bedrooms that surveil us. Some scientists believe the future of sleep won't be managed by devices, but by our own DNA. Deep in our genetic code lie the secrets of natural short sleepers, those rare individuals who thrive on just 4 to 6 hours of rest without harm. Genes like December 2nd and ADRB1 may one day be edited through CRISPR to reduce sleep need without cognitive decline, to enhance slow-wave sleep, or even to expand dream time. Imagine a future where you could choose when you sleep, how long you sleep, or even how deeply you dream. This is the promise and the peril of personalized chronobiology. Companies already offer chronotype profiling. Are you a night owl, a morning lark, an afternoon peak performer? Future apps may sync with your genes to create biofeedback-driven sleep schedules tailored to your cellular clocks. But this raises a profound question. If we can edit sleep, are we improving it, or tamper with one of nature's most sacred cycles? What if the 9 to 5 was never natural to begin with? What if our modern sleep crisis isn't about fixing ourselves, but about honoring the rhythms we were born with? Beyond sleep's biology lies its greatest mystery, dreaming. At MIT's Dream Lab, researchers are developing devices that gently guide the mind into targeted dream states. Through subtle audio cues, it becomes possible to seed themes into dreams, a technique called targeted memory reactivation. Startups are racing to produce lucid dreaming headbands, allowing users to become conscious during dreams and potentially steer their narratives. Could we soon choose our dreams the way we choose a playlist? Virtual reality is entering our bedrooms, creating immersive pre-sleep rituals and treating insomnia through cognitive behavioral therapy in digital worlds. The line between sleeping and dreaming, between rest and virtual experience, begins to blur. Meanwhile, in military labs, scientists explore synthetic sleep, compounds like modafinil that sustain wakefulness without the cognitive penalties of sleep deprivation. Imagine a pill that delivers the benefits of sleep in a fraction of the time. But at what cost? As one researcher said, we are learning not just to observe sleep, but to sculpt it. If sleep becomes optional, what happens to dreaming? What happens to the mystery that makes us human? Sleep is not bound to Earth alone. As humanity prepares for space travel, we face new sleep challenges. In microgravity, astronauts report shortened REM cycles, reduced melatonin production, disrupted circadian rhythms. NASA combats this with red spectrum lighting and strict sleep protocols. But on Mars, the problem intensifies. A Martian day is 24.6 hours, subtly out of sync with our Earth-born clocks. And for missions beyond Mars, some researchers explore hibernation, slowing metabolism, cooling the body, placing travelers into something like cryogenic sleep. Even in the stars, the human body still longs for rhythm. As one NASA scientist asked, what happens to the rhythm of sleep when you leave Earth's rhythm behind? Perhaps the answer lies not in conquering sleep, but in carrying its wisdom with us, a portable piece of home beating steadily in our chests, no matter how far we travel from the world that shaped our dreams. Not all visions of the future are technological. Some are cultural and deeply human. Movements like the nap ministry promote rest as resistance. In a world of overwork and hyperproductivity, they ask, what if napping is protest? What if slowing down is healing? What if sleep is not a weakness, but a right? Around the world, people are reclaiming rest. Nap pods in workplaces, digital detox retreats, sleep sabbaticals, sound baths, and yoga nidra. To rest is to remember you're human. To sleep is to say no to the relentless march of productivity, and yes to the ancient need for stillness. As Tricia Hersey writes, rest is not a luxury. Rest is a form of resistance against grind culture. Perhaps the future of sleep is not more technology, but more permission to rest. Perhaps the most radical act is simply to pause. So where are we headed? Will we engineer sleep for performance, shorter, sharper, more efficient? Or reclaim sleep as ceremony, slower, softer, more human? Will our bedrooms become data hubs? Or will we return to dark, silent nights? Will technology become a guardian of rest, or its final disruption? And as we build machines to monitor our dreams, will they one day dream of us? Perhaps the future of sleep is not just in our beds, but in our choices. In the quiet moments before slumber, we stand at the edge of this unknown, wondering what rest will mean when tomorrow finally wakes. Will we let the future re-engineer our rest, or will we remember how to dream? From the beginning, we have slept. In prehistoric darkness, our ancestors curled close beneath stars, beneath the safety of numbers. Sleep was communal, segmented, attuned to the sounds of wind, fire, and the footsteps of night. Later, in ancient temples, we sought sleep not just for rest, but for revelation. Dreams were messages from the gods. Night became a sacred space, a threshold between worlds. In the Middle Ages, sleep came in two parts. First sleep and second sleep, with wakeful hours between, filled with prayer, quiet conversation, reflection. Midnight was not a void to be filled, but a gentle pause in the rhythm of rest. Then came the age of light. Candles gave way to lamps. Lamps gave way to the electric bulb. And suddenly, the night was no longer sacred. It was colonized by time, by labor, by productivity. The Industrial Revolution compressed sleep into an efficient block. The factory whistle replaced the rooster's crow. By the 20th century, sleep had become a scientific puzzle. Measured, charted, medicalized. We wired the brain to electrodes and mapped the night into REM and non-REM, cycles like tides in the mind. But in the digital age, we fracture again. The blue light of screens tells our bodies it is still day. Social media scrolls replace midnight psalms. Our bedrooms hum with data, devices tracking the very thing we've forgotten how to feel. Sleep has always adapted, to the cave and to the castle, to the candle and the screen, to the field worker's siesta and the startup founder's all-nighter, to the monk's midnight prayer and the truck driver's roadside nap, to Earth's 24-hour day, and perhaps soon to Mars' 24.6-hour rhythm. But through every era, one truth remains. The night belongs to us, not just for survival, but for renewal. Sleep is a mirror reflecting culture, class, belief, and technology. It is shaped by the world around us, by the clocks we follow, the systems we build, the values we choose. As historian Roger Kurtz reminds us, we haven't lost sleep, we've changed it. Sometimes willingly, sometimes without noticing. As we look to the future, the question isn't just what's next for sleep? It's what will we choose to remember? To fix our sleep today, maybe we need to remember how we used to sleep before the modern world rewired our rhythms. Sleep is not just a habit. It's a relationship between body, nature, and time. In a world racing ever faster, perhaps the most radical act is to pause, to close our eyes not out of exhaustion, but out of intention, to sleep not because we are broken machines needing recharge, but because we are human beings woven into biological, emotional, and cultural rhythms that span millennia. So tonight, as you lie in darkness, remember, you are part of the oldest ritual on Earth. Long before science measured sleep, before industry compressed it, before technology tracked it, there was just night and rest. Not a problem to solve, not a weakness to overcome, but a place to return to, a home beneath the noise, a dream waiting quietly for you to arrive. Sleep is more than a necessity. It is an act of trust, of healing, of return, in the silence between heartbeats, in the space between thoughts, in the moment before dreams begin. There you are, human, whole, at rest. The night is yours. It always has been.